confused, Merritt leaned her chin on her hand. "Show him in then, and I'll start pouring." It wasn't that she loved soothing difficult people, but she definitely liked to smooth things over when she could. As the oldest of 6 children, she'd always been the one to settle quarrels among her brothers and sisters, or come up with indoor games on rainy days. More than once, she'd orchestrated midnight raids on the kitchen pantry, or told them stories when they'd sneak to her room after bedtime. She sorted through the neat stack of files on her desk and found the one labelled MacRae Distillery. Not long before her husband, Joshua, had died, he'd struck a deal to provide warehousing for MacRae in England. He told her about his meeting with the Scotsman, who'd been visiting London for the first time. "Oh, but you must ask him to dinner," Merritt had exclaimed, unable to bear the thought of a stranger travelling alone in an unfamiliar place. "I did," Joshua had replied in his flat American accent. "He thanked me for the invitation, but turned it down." "Why?" "MacRae is somewhat rough-mannered. He was raised on a remote island off the west coast of Scotland. I suspect he finds the prospect of meeting the daughter of an earl overwhelming." "You needn't worry about that," Merritt had protested. "You know my family is barely civilised." But Joshua replied that her definition of barely civilised was different from a rural Scotsman's, and MacRae would be far more comfortable left to his own devices. Merritt had never dreamed that when she and Keir MacRae finally met, Joshua would be gone, and she would be the one managing Sterling Enterprises. Her brother came to the doorway and paused at the threshold. "If you'll come this way," he said to someone outside the room, "I'll make introductions and then—" Keir MacRae burst into the office like a force of nature and strode past Luke, coming to a stop on the other side of Merritt's desk. Looking sardonic, Luke went to lean against the door jamb and folded his arms. "On the other hand," he said to no one in particular, "why waste time with introductions?" Merritt stared in bemusement at the big, wrathful Scotsman. He was an extraordinary sight, more than 6 feet of muscle and brawn, dressed in a thin, wet shirt and trousers that clung as if they'd been glued to his skin. An irritable shiver, almost certainly from the chill of evaporating alcohol, ran over him. Scowling, he reached up to remove his flat cap, revealing a shaggy mop of hair, several months past a good cut. The thick locks were a beautiful, cool shade of amber, shot with streaks of light gold. He was handsome, despite his unkempt state, very handsome. His blue eyes were alert with the devil's own intelligence, the cheekbones high, the nose straight and strong. A tawny beard obscured the line of his jaw, perhaps concealing a weak chin? She couldn't tell. Regardless, he was a stunner. Merritt wouldn't have thought there was a man alive who could fluster her like this. She was a confident and worldly woman, after all. But she couldn't ignore the flush rising from the high-buttoned neck of her dress, or the way her heart had begun to pound, like a clumsy burglar trampling the flower bed. "I want to speak to someone in charge," he said brusquely. "That would be me," Merritt said with a quick smile, coming around the desk. "Lady Merritt Sterling at your service." She extended her hand. MacRae was slow to respond. His fingers closed over hers, cool and slightly rough. The sensation raised the hairs on the back of her neck, and she felt something uncoil pleasantly at the pit of her stomach. "My condolences," he said gruffly, releasing her hand. "Your husband was a good man." "Thank you." She took a steadying breath. "Mr. MacRae, I'm so sorry for the way your delivery has been botched. I'll submit paperwork to make sure you're exempted from the landing charges and wharfage rates, and Sterling Enterprises will handle the lighterage fees. And in the future, I'll make sure a berth is reserved on the day your shipment is due." "There'll be no fucking future shipments if I'm to be put out of business," MacRae said. "The excise agent says every barrel of whisky that hasn't been delivered to the warehouse by midnight will no longer be under bond, and I'm to be paying duties on it immediately." "What?" Merritt shot an outraged glance at her brother, who shrugged and shook his head to indicate he knew nothing about it. This was deadly serious business. The government's regulations about storing whisky under bond were strictly enforced, and violations would earn terrible penalties. It would be bad for her business, and disastrous for MacRae's. "No," she said firmly, "that will not